Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Season 3 of The Legend of Korra. And I gotta say, folks, this season is off to what I would definitely call a really solid start. It's not quite as fast-paced, I think, as the previous seasons, but that's okay, because this is us dealing with a very seriously changed status quo. Literally, the entire world has changed. And this is about the readjustment for everybody. And I was just thinking that one of the things that I think is really great about what they did last season was cutting Korra off from the past avatars. Because obviously this whole the spirit stuff is not really Korra's strong suit. So if that hadn't happened, well, the first thing she would have done is just go into the avatar state and contact the past avatars who knew how to deal with spirits well and say, hey, what do I do? And now that that's not an option that's on the table, it means Korra is, of course, going to be forced to rise to the challenge. And that's one of the things that in good storytelling you want to do. You want your heroes to be forced to rise to the challenge. If they can deal with the situation, the major conflict that's going on, by picking up the phone and calling the expert and saying, "Hey, what should I do?" and that solves the problem. Well, they've done bupkis, and it doesn't make for a good story. And this taps in again to the fact that the more wisdom-based, aspects of being the Avatar are where Korra struggles most. Again, she's the polar opposite of Aang. Aang was very good on the whole wisdom and spirituality side. That was his thing. And Korra, well, as I said, that's definitely not her thing, but she's been making some progress. And we have seen that she's able to do that spirit dance or whatever, and it does work for a minute, but then it completely backfires. But what I do like about that whole scene there is that it shows that Korra is learning how to really solve problems basically by thinking with her head. Season 1 Korra was all about, I'm just going to run in there and air, fire, and water bend at it until I win. And of course, we saw that option. It only got her so far in Season 1. But as time has gone by, we've seen that Korra is finding a better balance within herself between the physical and the physical, fighting and thinking, between the spiritual and the intellectual, whatever. You get what I'm saying here. And it is certainly interesting to see, of course, Korra getting raked over the coals in the press. We've talked about how Mako is very much Batman in some ways, what with the tragic origin and all. Well, here Korra's getting a little taste of what it's like to be Spider-Man. And it's interesting that in the comics, Spider-Man's longtime nemesis, J. Jonah Jameson, a couple of years ago actually became mayor of New York City. So for a couple of years, Spidey had to deal with the whole thing of the mayor is J. Jonah Jameson. So, Korra's definitely getting it from both the press and the city government. I'm not really sure if the mayor has the authority to permanently kick Korra out of the city, but it's one of those things where let's not question it too much. And even if he didn't, under the circumstances, it's hard to blame Korra for not wanting to stick around. But anyway, the other big thing, apart from the spirits that we're dealing with, of course, is the appearances of all these new airbenders. And I'm sure the details of how and why all this happened we'll get into more detail as the season goes by. But this is certainly a really great thing, because now the whole making sure that airbenders continue to exist is not entirely on Tenzin and his family. I mean, can you imagine what his life was like before he got married and had kids? It's just like, man, if I ever, am not paying attention while I'm walking across the street one day and I get run over by a bus, the world is unbelievably screwed. So, and I do love that they had that scene where him sitting there looking at the statue of his father, talking to him about, like, hey, the Air Nation is back, Dad. I wish you could have lived to see this. And while certainly Aang would have been extremely pleased to see this happen. But, of course, we see that Tenzin has not quite thought of the full ramifications of what all this means. And let's just kind of continue down that road. Just looking at what happens when he and Korra and the gang go off to try and recruit the other airbenders. It really hasn't dawned on Tenzin, or more likely that he's just simply blind to this fact because of his enthusiasm. Like, remember, Tenzin was basically the one guy in the world who was really raised to be essentially an air nomad. And of course, he has grown up around the air acolytes, who, if you have paid attention to what's going on in the Avatar comics, were basically initiated by, well, basically not exactly founded by Aang, but he was the one who kind of gave his stamp of approval to these guys and said, okay, I'll teach you the ways of the air nomads. And the people who have come to join the air nomads over the years, people like Pima, are people who have chosen to adopt their philosophy and lifestyle of their own free will. And Tenzin, having grown up around that, of course, that's normal to him. That's his culture. That's his heritage. And, of course, he's a big, big fan of it. But what he's really blind to is what he is asking of these people that he's trying to recruit. He's basically just walking into their houses and saying, you've got airbending. That means you are part of the Air Nation. I like how he doesn't say air nomads because, well, those guys are dead and gone. But basically, he's going into these people's homes and saying, because of this random bit of circumstance, something that you have no control over, something that you had no choice in, you now have this incredible obligation, and you basically have to do what I say. Now, granted, Tenzin tries to phrase it much more diplomatically than that. He really is basically going out there and trying to sell his lifestyle to people. But as we see with Korra dealing with the basement dweller, when that doesn't go well, she basically tries to lean on the guy. And you don't really get success that way. You don't go around basically laying obligations on complete strangers and then getting frustrated that they don't react well to that. And a lot of that could be said for the way people act on certain parts of the internet. Tumblr. But yeah, we're not going to get into that because, well, there's enough bad things to say about Tumblr already, isn't there? I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Tumblr, but it's definitely light side and dark side edge to it. But anyway, getting back to what I was trying to say, is that the people who have this bending put on them, he does kind of I guess if I could go back to the Spider-Man thing, you can make the case of, with great power must come great responsibility. Well, yes, these people do have this power, and it's been thrust on them. So they do have the responsibility to learn how to control this power so that they don't accidentally hurt anyone. But what Tenzin is really not realized yet is that just because they have that power does not mean that they're obligated to ditch their entire lives and go and start living as members of the Air Nation. I mean, it really is amazing. It didn't dawn on him earlier that this farmer is not going to want to completely abandon his family and just everything that he's worked for his entire life, just because Tenzin says so. Because Tenzin has literally come into this guy's village and said, hey, you got an obligation here. And then, of course, the guy's kids start begging him, and even then it doesn't really dawn on Tenzin that this is the absolute worst possible approach. And which is really shocking because, of course, Tenzin's a father himself. He's got 4 kids. But again, Tenzin is so blinded by his own joy, and that's really the tragic part of it all, that he doesn't really see what he's asking of these people. And of course, this is why it keeps blowing up in his face again and again. Now, you'd think that Asami, being the daughter of a businessman, thus somewhat well versed, at least thus most likely versed in, how to pitch something, would have probably stepped in and said something, but And I do like that it's Bo Lin who kind of realizes, you know what, maybe there's a better approach to this. And it does really show that while Bo Lin is a pretty good pro-bender, he at the end of the day is a man whose talent may just really be showbiz. and that's interesting. That's something we really haven't seen before in the show. But anyway, I guess the best way I can kind of think of it in terms of the way I'm looking at this whole situation is it's sort of like imagine if Professor Xavier and the X-Men, like anytime they found somebody who had mutant powers, basically showed up to their house and said, yeah, you need to come to the Xavier Institute and join the X-Men. I mean, screw you if you don't like it. You're coming. Don't make us don't make us have Wolverine drag you out there. Korra in this case probably being Wolverine. Actually, I think Korra, if she was familiar with Marvel Comics, would probably be in some ways quite flattered by that comparison. I mean, Korra is the best there is at what she does, after all. But anyway. Oh yeah, folks, I do owe you guys an apology for taking a few days to get up this review up. I had guests come into the house on Friday. They've stayed the whole weekend, and well, let's just say that doing a recording like this with my two step nieces running around the house screaming and terrorizing the cats was not an option. But anyway, let's kind of talk about some of the other characters. I've already mentioned Bolin. Besides his old showbiz shtick, I really don't have too awful much to say about what's going on with him. From what I've been hearing, that the behind the scenes, they've got some really cool stuff planned for Bolin, and I'm really hoping that pans out. I think he kind of needs to rise up, to take a little bit more of a page out of Sokka's book, step up and be a little bit more than the comic relief guy. Now, granted, Bolin has certainly had a few of those moments before, but I think now would be a really good time to flesh out his personality with more depth. Asami, I'm really loving what's going on with Asami. That whole thing with her at the beginning and Korra just hanging out, being gal pals, laughing about it, having that honest heart-to-heart talk about Mako. It's like, yeah, I kind of kissed your boyfriend while we were still together. Oh, so did I. I'm kind of glad they're putting the whole shipping thing to the side because, well, as has been pointed out, generally speaking, the fans were getting a little bit tired of it. And I don't think anybody wants to go back to the bad old days of the endless ship wars that haunted the previous series. So I think anything in terms of shipping is probably just going to stay on the level of Jinora having a little bit of a crush on Kai and leaving it there. But I do really like that Asami has really kind of taken up in some ways the mantle of folks like Mei and Ty Lee, is that she doesn't have powers, but she's taught herself how to compete with people who are very powerful, people who are benders, on fairly even footing. She's got the Iron Man gauntlet all going on, and she herself is a pretty agile person, so Asami can definitely pull her weight on Team Avatar, and I really, really like that. I always think that the person who's like that, like Sokka served that role in the last series, the non-bender on the team, really is in some ways one of the most important people because they provide that perspective of non-benders. And considering that the majority of the people in the world are non-benders, I mean, just look at how this was the big theme in Season 1, that does need to be there. Mako. I'm really a little embarrassed for the Team Avatar for not really realizing that the reason Mako doesn't want to come and stay on Airbender Island is that it's pretty awkward to go and move in with your ex-girlfriend. But, and of course there's still a little bit of weirdness there, but it's great that Korra has basically put it behind her, and it's really Mako who's just not quite ready for things to go back to normal just yet. And I think we can fairly certainly safely count on some sort of a, hey, we're cool now, Mako, scene between him and Korra somewhere down the line. Get him and get Team Avatar on the same page, and then we can go from there. But I am very interested now that he and Bolin have found their family. And did you notice that their grandmother was that girl whose name was Yin, was the girl that Zuko went on a date with back when he was living in Ba Sing Se. Now, I thought that girl's name was Jin, but I guess I must have remembered that wrong. I have to say that's quite a really cool piece of Avatar continuity there. And I really do hope that in some way or another she and Zuko do meet up again and just have a wait a minute, I remember you kind of moment. Just because it would be absolutely hilarious. But yeah, sort of getting a chance to connect with their Earth Kingdom family. I think that's going to provide some really interesting stuff to go on there. Let's see what else. I think that kind of covers everything for Team Avatar proper. So let's briefly talk about Kai. Not a huge amount to say about him just yet, but this does really go back to what I said earlier with the whole Spider-Man thing of great power and great responsibility. Well, Kai had this great power dropped on him, and he is using it very irresponsibly. He's using it for his own selfish ends. And we saw we are all familiar with the story of what using his power shortly after he got it led to for Peter Parker. And now Kai's getting a little bit of a taste of that. And, this does show that there are going to be some negative consequences to airbenders coming back. Right here, we see them basically forcibly drafted into the Earth Kingdom Army by the Dai Li. Considering that they were disbanded by Opal's father, I'm really interested to find out exactly how they came back. And you got to think, back in Republic City, are the Triple Threat Triad guys going, holy crap, I guess we're going to have to change our name to the Quadruple Threat Triad now? And then we've got all of these evil benders who have popped up. Not a huge amount to say about them just yet, because we've really only got the very basics of who they are and kind of what their deal is, and we have no idea really what their greater agenda is. But I really am looking forward to those guys, seeing a well fleshed out. I don't know if it's probably fair. I don't know just yet if it's quite fair to call them a terrorist organization. But it looks like they're probably going to be going in that direction. It actually reminds me a little bit of Liberate, the group over on that show Continuum. Basically they're terrorists, but there's only 8 of them, but they're all really well fleshed out and interesting people. And if you're not watching that show, seriously do. It's really good. But anyway, we of course do get to see Zuko back, and he's pretty spry for a guy who's about 100 years old. I do love that. And I do like that moment in the elevator where he's talking about the time he hired Combustion Man to kill the Avatar. And he just kind of goes, didn't work. And that's just so great because you see just a little bit of classic teenage Zuko there. You can sort of see that even though he's become the Fire Lord, even though he's kind of got the Iroh beard and the dragon, there's still just a little bit of that awkward young guy still in there. And I absolutely love that. The Earth Queen, not a huge amount to say about her. It's just sort of disappointing that the Earth King's daughter would turn out to be such an awful person, since the Earth King was a pretty nice guy. A very naive guy, but a nice person. But on the other hand, the Earth Queen does make a perfectly valid point that Republic City is built on land that she can pretty reasonably claim was indeed stolen from the Earth Kingdom. So she does have a legitimate grievance there. And I like how Korra very quickly realizes that, when she's sent out there to collect the tax money, that she might not be in the right on that one. And of course, it was pretty amusing to see what Mad Max type of characters would look like in the Korraverse, in the terms of the guys who attacked the tax caravan. And if you have no idea what Mad Max is, it's basically probably the most influential post-apocalypse movie ever made. All the cliches of post-apocalypse stuff, well, not all of them, but the vast majority of them come from Mad Max. And it's definitely a really fun movie, even after all these years. And let me see. Nothing else really comes to mind. A lot of this whole thing is just really setting the stage for what's going to be going on, getting all the pieces on the board, the opening moves. But overall, folks, I think that this is maybe going to be a little bit more of a, I don't know if I want to call it a slower paced season, but I think this is a season that's definitely going to kind of take its time to really build rather than try and burst out of the gate, as it were. But this show has shown us over 2 seasons that they know how to build up to a slam bang finale No reason to think that they're going to disappoint us on that this time around. So, yeah, folks, I think we're in for another great season. I am super excited to see what's going to happen next time around. And that'll do it for this time. As always, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.